Coin traders, what's going on? Checking in on Bitcoin right now. Are at the cusp, looking like we're going to be retesting 60,000 over the last few days. A lot of bearish patterns here, unfortunately. So zooming in on this candle, big upside wick. So as you can see, we were looking at some upside momentum. Started off the candle doing the upside thing just below 65,000. Huge rejection though, closing off the candle bearish, but still looking at tentatively initial support of this 26-period daily exponential moving average. Current daily candle extremely likely to smash that though, with about 4.5 hours left until the close. Obviously then confirming this 12-period EMA as that closing level of resistance once we actually broke back below it. So rally above, immediate rejection, breaking back below that level. And as you can see down here, the last bullish day, extremely minimal in volume, only looking at just over 2,000 here on Coinbase anyway. So definitely a lot of potential for some sell pressure, but we know that we do have to look at a big level right around 60,000, just above it. So if we do draw a price level right at 60,544, looking left, big level of previous closing support over 4 days. And as you can see, especially with a lot of this bearish volume coming in, bulls were able to ultimately hold it, defend it, and kind of push up to a new lower high now compared to the previous trend, coming in at 66,550. Right now, though, given the amount of decline in overall bullish volume that has been coming in, especially putting in this lower high, and given how far we are above this 60,500 support level, does seem extremely likely and probable right now. We will at least test this. Might see some wicking below on the daily, but more or less, we're pretty much going to be seeing another test of this 60,000 level. So, still not necessarily an overall extremely bad thing, because we know that zoomed out, we have been in this overall sideways chop pattern since March. So ever since the trend high coming in, been in this pattern for 211 days. So a long period of time here, looking for a very nice breakout. But if we actually want to flip over into the monthly chart here, still looking at a very nice bull flag coming in here, as we do see prices retracing. And the thing about this current pattern that we actually love to see on these big, strong bull moves, we love to see longer term consolidation that actually allows the exponential moving averages to roll up, provide that support for the price, which can then allow it to rally once again. In the previous market cycles, if we actually go ahead and look left here, you can see we did get extremely far above the 12-period EMA, huge sell-off, and then that did bounce for our attempt. But in the current situation, we actually don't see this parabolic move resulting in an immediate sell-off and a retracement. We're actually holding this level for a Bitcoin here on this chart, especially as we do allow these exponential moving averages to roll up. So next thing that's extremely interesting to look at on this chart is that if we actually draw a price level pretty much right at 58,000, just right at the $59,000 mark almost, if we look at where we're finding support right along that level, both in terms of the close as well as wicking, and then looking left, this is where we found monthly closing level resistance here back on the 2021 cycle. So the fact that we are now seeing so much support on top of such a big previous resistance level, especially when this was when we saw the most amount of bullish volume coming in, especially compared to when we actually did put in our previous all-time high, didn't necessarily see that in terms of volume. So we know that the peak momentum and euphoria actually happened on this instance where we did get stuck up at that level right around 59K, which is exactly where we're finding that longer term monthly support right now. And if we actually want to look at a Fibonacci from the bottom of this trend where Bitcoin found its low in the mid 15,000s up to the high, we're looking at holding Fibonacci support well above the 38.2, but also most of the monthly candles are still forming support on top of the 23.6 Fibonacci support. So again, another extremely good sign. And we know that especially in such a bullish case chart where we've just had months and months and months of very nice upside, consolidation was the best option and pattern for longer term and continued growth. Because otherwise, if we were looking at this being a topping signal, we would have actually had a much greater sell-off and a lot bigger retracement already, pretty much putting in a lot of those downside actions. But because we're actually looking at sentiment being so low, yet maintaining this bullish continuation pattern, we know that once euphoria does pick up, this chart's just going to absolutely take off, and we're going to start seeing a lot higher highs. Pretty much now, it's just a matter of when, but especially after being in this long bullish pattern for over 8 months now, we're actually looking at a very, very nice opportunity. If we check out these months too, we're looking at a very pattern of a green, red, green on each one. So green, red, green, red, green, red, green, red. So if we actually do see the second continuation of one of these candles, that's actually going to be an extremely big trigger for that leg of growth. So for example, if we actually see October start to take off and we do close the month green, that's going to be 2 consecutive month-on-month green candles, and that's pretty much going to be an extremely big catalyst to let us know that we're going to start to take off and actually break out of this longer-term consolidation pattern. So like we said, on the short-term chart, this isn't necessarily looking that great. Looking out, we know that we're seeing a lot of chop overall sideways, which is why we are looking mostly at the monthly chart and the longer-term charts, because even if we do end up seeing this just be a continuation to the downside, we know that likely we're going to be putting in a higher bottom since we already have before. So first lower low and lowest bottom we've seen was just below the 50,000 mark. Next low that we did put in that we have been holding so far, especially when we put in our new higher high, was coming at 52,530. So extremely likely right now in this instance to be able to hold that from current prices down to that low would be a retracement of almost 14% from current prices down to that low. So we would have to see prices pull back over 14% from current levels. And also keep in mind too, we have been seeing a little bit of a pull off and a pullback in overall bearish selling pressure. So likely even if we do break below 60,000, I don't see that necessarily sustaining that long, ultimately just allowing us to pull in the next leg of that higher low before heading back up. Like we said, the longer term charts are in very control right now, so we do know that it does take a lot longer for it to happen, and that's why it's been an extremely slow and frustrating year. But nonetheless, we've always known patience is a virtue, but right now have to look at the bigger picture. Bigger picture right now isn't showing anything scary. Longer term, just looking at a continuation pattern, which does typically tend to break out in the direction of travel heading into that consolidation pattern. And if we actually want to look at this as a potential flag, just to give some speculation and predictive targets, if we actually look at this as a potential opportunity for breakout, we could be looking all the way up until about over 110,000. So from current price levels, that would potentially be about an 82% gain to the upside, almost a 1x from here. So I want to look at the weekly chart right now, and specifically got the 50 period EMA for the weekly pulled up just to talk about how supportive it has been. And even if we do look since the pullback here where Bitcoin did find its low just above the $15,000 level, pulled up, found it as a big point of resistance here, flipped it again into support, rejected it once again, flipped it into resistance, finally broke through it, confirmed it as support, and then we took off. So we know that especially given how far we are above, we always see tests of exponential moving averages at some point in healthy markets. So despite having a pullback total from the top to the recent trend low, we are looking at 33%, but overall down to the test 25. So still not an abnormal amount of retracement, especially in a bullish consolidation pattern, just like what we're seeing right now. So especially after putting in a new trend high compared to setting our new higher lows, so low, high, higher low, higher high, in a great start of setup to actually confirm this as a directional breakout, although we can't say anything just yet. So since this is the weekly chart, I would expect actually a few more weeks, potentially even a couple more months before we actually start to get confirmation of a longer term direction. Right now, if we do want to look at an actual trend line for resistance, this is pretty defined right now, so we know that if we do actually break above this level, what we would need to see is a back test and then a confirmation of a breakout. This is going to take time to happen just because we're on the weekly chart. So again, we're not expecting anything soon. And we did put in our all-time high soon before typically in historical cycles. So we do think that we could see the potential for a time shift, not necessarily to line up with what we've seen typically always in the past for these given time periods. So since sentiment right now has been dropping, we do need to see that start to play out. But because sentiment has been so low with a continuation pattern, we know that once it does rise again, that's pretty much going to help take this chart off. Now, do have the 12 and 26 pulled back up, as you can see on this chart for the weekly. They are starting to get close, so hopefully we don't actually see any type of bearish cross. What we'd love to see is confirmation of this 26 period EMA as support, and then ultimately allowing that to set that higher low again and see prices heading back out to top off this high. That would be one of the best case scenarios right now. So we're going to draw a line at 60,670. Flip back into the daily, and once again, you can see how this level just aligns perfectly with previous levels of resistance and support. So if this can actually provide support, this would be one of the best things that we could see for a bullish case. Otherwise, dropping below it would mean dropping below that exponential moving average on the weekly chart, which would probably mean a lot longer, prolonged, sustained period of that bull flag to play out before we actually get any type of directional breakout. Obviously, a lot of market factors right now playing in on the global scale, so this is something new that we actually haven't seen too much before in the past. And because we're expecting a little bit more pullback from Bitcoin, but also to set a higher low, do you want to turn on VPVR to look at some targets to the downside, volume profile, visible range. If we look over here on the right, we can see it does start to taper off from current levels down to about 57,000. So this would probably be about the estimate that we would find support happen between current price levels and about 57K. The good news is if we do put in a price at a higher low around 57, that would still maintain that higher low like we talked about and allow us to actually start to see a little bit more uptrend to potentially shoot for the upside target around 66K, just above that at 66.5. But like we look at on VPVR, that's also the next big peak for the level here. But if we actually do break above that 665 level, then pretty much the volume does start to taper off, which means getting on top of that target would actually see Bitcoin prices a lot easier to maintain and take control of to order see further upside. So again, this would be nothing new for a typical pullback on this type of cycle, since it would be most likely just a typical ABC type pattern and retracement before actually starting to head back up again. So on these sort of phases, we do see a pullback. It doesn't necessarily always be constant and sustained before seeing the next leg of upside, because typically we do see an impulse that does lead us down to the next side. But on the longer term charts, this then would just be a normal pullback to set that higher low, just like we see on the weekly. So that is a setup that we're anticipating and expecting right now, especially given all of these bearish signs, and especially seeing such a big upper wick rejecting from these exponentials and breaking one of these big support levels, along with being in a longer term consolidation pattern. So overall, no change to the longer term pattern that we've been establishing. Obviously still frustrating since we've had to be this patient for this long, but know that setting up for a consolidation this long does lead us to have an incredibly explosive and exciting future bull market ahead, if things do of course go to plan. Obviously, it's not impossible for this to just see a dump in price, but given the run up and this longer term consolidation at the current level, we know that this pattern typically is going to play out a lot more bullish than we anticipate, and crypto does get a lot more bullish than we ever imagined possible. And all this too is still in the face of some of the biggest fear and a lot of neutral or non-existent sentiment for crypto at all. So to maintain a huge price level support maintains this as a very strong level, which does mean that a very big explosive move is likely to be coming here in the future, which does make it a lot stronger and more sustainable too, since we have had this much and this long of a period of just sideways boring action chop and establishing this overall zone as a very nice level for Bitcoin's price. So with that, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show for Bitcoin today, and a little update on what we're looking at right now in the near term future here. If you do have any questions, comments, issues, predictions, all that stuff, drop me a note in the comment sections below. Do love getting back to each and every one of you. Otherwise, that is going to go ahead and wrap us up for the show today. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. Take care, everyone. Hope to see you soon, and I'll catch you back in the next video.